Hi, everybody. It's Aundrea DeLeon with Changed Inside Out, and we are live in the Ditching Diets VIP and Emotional Eating group, and we are in week 5. And this week, before our group session tonight, I am live with the amazing Sherry Hess of the Flavor Remedy. And Sherry, I can't even go through your accolades. What I told the group is that you're a culinary expert, but that you also are kind of our intuitive guide of what flavor and taste buds and all those things, how they play into our lives and what they do for us. So Sherry, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be a part of this conversation.
Yeah, me too. So why don't you do a brief introduction for us, since I didn't do a great job for you?
You did a fine job. It's hard to explain what I do because no one really does it. But you are correct in that I have a culinary background. And, most recently, I also, developed my own spice company around this concept of flavor and health. But what that has really kind of morphed into is, kind of building a conversation around flavor itself. So what I do now is I really kind of help people to understand how to trust your bodies through your sense of taste. And, we all, as long as assuming your senses aren't compromised in any way, we have this beautiful ability to detect nutrition through our sense of taste. And we've come to not trust that for a lot of reasons. And one of the biggest reasons is because our sense of taste is something, it's the only sense where we have to make a choice, right? So we have to step outside of our bodies just experiencing it. So in other words, you can smell and you can hear and you can see without making a choice. Right. But when it comes to eating, we have to make that choice, right?
Right. Yep.
So it creates this opportunity for this disconnect. And in doing so, we have kind of lost a lot of faith in trusting our sense of taste. So what I do is I bring people back to that, back to your own bodies, and back to the 5 categories of flavor that we experience. So they are salty, sweet, sour, bitter, and umami. And some of those are probably very familiar to people, and some of them might be like, what is that?
Yeah. Well, I will let you expand on those in just a minute. But one of the things that we've been talking about for the past 4 weeks is talking about how all of our eating habits really were created in our childhood.
Yeah.
And so how sometimes that even hijacks us a bit, because one of the things about weight control and food, et cetera, it's not like cigarettes, it's not like alcohol, it's not like drugs or things like that, where you can remove that from your life to remove temptation, to, out of sight, out of mind, because the thing with food is we need food. Our bodies need food. We need food for fuel. We need food for nutrition. So you can't take food out of your life at all. And food represents so much to us, because in so many situations, like food is connection. We get together at meals. We console people with food when they've experienced losses or that kind of stuff. And so we grow up with these, we grow up, and we even talked about it in the group, my grandmother used to make me this dish and I loved my grandmother's love. And so when I'm craving love, I want that cheesy rice casserole with processed cheese. I even saw a recipe for it. It says processed cheese food. I'm like, that is an oxymoron. You cannot have processed cheese food. Right. And then what happens is we sort of get hijacked, right? Where food becomes a response to us emotionally. And so, when we're feeling tension, when we're feeling, and we don't turn people down for food. People offer us food at work or things like that. And, we're also taught, don't turn people's gifts down. It's rude. It's impolite. And then what happens is we get kind of addicted to the carbs. We get addicted to the sugars, things like that. And then we lose trust in ourselves and we lose trust in our bodies. And so a lot of the things that we've been talking about is a lot of mindset shifting and a lot of emotional reprogramming. And really looking at our relationship with ourselves and looking at our relationship with food differently.
Yeah, it's powerful. And, Everything that you said is really so true. And, it's part of the reason why I'm so passionate about food itself, because food is connection. And it's not just, connection in our society and in our social life and in our families, but it's connection to the earth. I mean, it's connection to everything, right? It's a complete cycle. And a lot has happened to our food to make not only the emotional aspects of things challenging, but the nutrition factor is challenging as well too. So
well, one of the things we talked about last week is what refined sugar does and what sugar has done to us. It is basically hijacked our ability to naturally create that serotonin, that natural happy feel good hormone. It's kind of almost become a mental addiction, not only just a physical addiction, right? It also becomes somewhat of a mental addiction. And those mental addictions are really hard to give up because the mind is so powerful. The mind will steer you towards what it thinks is best for you, what it thinks you want. It's here to protect you. It's here to keep you away from pain. It loves what's familiar and wants to reject what's unfamiliar. So if I've never been a big lover of vegetables, that's unfamiliar to me. And so this wanting to eat vegetables and these kind of foods, I didn't grow up that's not familiar to me.
Right.
And so we've talked about how we can start using visualization. And as we start creating visualization about, it's not good food, bad food. Is this providing nutrition for me? Is this sustaining my body, et cetera? Or is this fast fat? Because fast food is fast fat. And how that sugar addiction actually then works against us because our body naturally then wants to put on fat to protect our organs against that sugar. So even some of those cravings for sweet things or salty things, we lose trust with ourselves because we're like, but I want those, but there's nothing that's good for me.
Right.
So walk us through your the 5 flavors that we have and kind of, what they mean for us.
Yeah. So, the really interesting part about looking at food through the lens of these categories of flavors is that the way I distinguish the food that has nutrition versus like flavorful food that is not backed by nutrition is I use the term what I call living flavors. So if you're going to get a flavor from a food and have it be something that supports your body, it should be from a living source. So
we call it the 4 R's. We call it if it roams.
Yeah.
Right. If it roams the earth, if it rots, if I can eat it raw, and if it's recognizable. Yeah. Right. We kind of talk about the 4 R's. So that sounds like right in line.
Yes, absolutely. And when it comes to flavor itself, and you talk about that mind-body connection, that brain connection, and how our brain is very familiar with sugar and salt, right? Sugar and salt are 2 things that have completely been, I should say, sweet and salty flavors have been completely ruined by, food manufacturing because they have stripped all of those flavors of all the nutrients that we are designed to detect behind it. Right. So I'll go through the flavors real quick, and then I'm going to come back to the sweet and the salty because those are the 2 most emotionally charged flavor categories for lots of reasons and for a lot of the reasons that you've discussed. And for me, it's really important that we talk about them from the aspect of the nutrition that they should bring because they're not bringing it in any kind of packaged food. And that's what leads to us just going back for more and going back for more and going back for more because we're never satisfied because the nutrition isn't there.
Right.
So I'll just kind of run through each flavor real quick and some of the emotional ties that go with each flavor. And that's not, a steadfast rule. That's just something that kind of comes up around these flavors. So the first one is sweet, right? So we all know what sweet is. We can all stand around the water cooler and talk about if you're a sweet girl or a salty girl, right? You can usually categorize yourself as one of the 2 or both sometimes. But we're familiar with sweet and we're familiar with salty. And there's also, most of us can relate to some kind of a craving around sweet or a craving around salty, right? They're also the flavors that we're typically told to avoid, right? If you're starting to eat healthy, oh, I can't eat sweets. Oh my God, I can't eat anything sweet. If I eat something
Yep.
sweet, I'm a bad person. If I eat
Yep.
something sweet, I can't control myself. If I eat something sweet, you know, all the things. It creates this like you have to build your willpower, right? Like you have to avoid the sweets.
Yep.
And the reasoning behind that, you know, is the diet business has, you know, they know that it's a thing because we are so inundated with sweetness that does not have nutrition.
Right.
So our brains get addicted to it, right? And I'm sure
Yep.
you've talked about that.
Yep.
So, you know, when you think of sweetness in general, the nutrition that should be behind the sweetness is the energy. But the other thing that I talk about with sweet in nature is that sweet never comes alone. So sweet doesn't show up in nature without another flavor with it. It always comes typically packaged with something that's bitter. And I'll get into bitter in a minute. So right there, just the fact that you are in nature receiving multiple flavors at one time versus anything that's processed, you know, a Twinkie, a cupcake, a cookie that doesn't even have any spices in it. It's just like bleached white flour and bleached white sugar. There's no other flavor categories in them. So, you know, and sweetness, the emotions that come with sweetness, it's just like you said, you know, the things that you grew up loving. So there's this yearning for love, this desire to be fed and fueled and loved are typically some of the emotions tied with sweetness. Salty. So when we taste salt in nature, what we really should be experiencing is minerals. Like a you know, a good multivitamin kind of mineral thing. If you just look at the comparison of like a bleached white salt to a pink Himalayan salt. Now, there's a lot of controversy and there's a lot of talk around that, but the bottom line is that there are minerals in a natural salt, right? And the food industry created the white salts and stripped it of all its minerals and stripped it of all of its anything that could be beneficial because it was too inconvenient to put into, you know, the consistency of color and texture that they wanted. It still gives us the flavor without the nutrition, right?
Yeah. And we talked about some of the things we've talked about is even like with rice or foods, it's about the presentation. And so the more clean it looks, the more clean it seems we're eating. White flour, white salt, white rice.
Oh, and it's marketed that way, right?
Yes.
It's marketed bleached and sanitized. I mean, we live in this whole bleached and sanitized world, and you know, it's presented to us as if it's something that's beneficial to us, but the reality is it's, you know, it's something that makes it easier to create consistency in food. And you know, the whole white flour thing, and we just, the smarter we get, the more we're ruining our food, right? Like the more the things are kind of getting into this ability to be manufactured and recreated. And from a flavor standpoint, the flavor industry knows exactly how to get us addicted to food and how our brains respond to food and what the brain is looking for when it gets food. And when it doesn't get it, it just keeps eating, right?
Yes. Feed the monster. We talked about it's just you're just feeding the monster because the monster is never satisfied.
Yeah. So a lot of the emotions that come with salt, and I've always said that I'm a salty girl, you know, a lot of times it's like a stress response. Like there's these adrenals that are challenged. And when you feel stressed or when you feel like you need support and, you know, you feel like things are just kind of not smooth and steady, you know, energy levels are all over the place. And you're craving salt. Those are the emotions that usually get kind of tied to that because it does. I mean, all the things that you hear the doctors talk about avoiding salt for, it's there. The cause for concern is because it's out of balance. When the reality is when it's in balance, it's supporting those same exact systems, right? Your circulation, your hydration, your adrenals, like that's what minerals support. And when you're eating salty flavors from nature, and I'm not just saying pink Himalayan salt. I mean, I'm talking about the salty flavors, detecting saltiness in vegetables, in foods, in an apple. Like if you really look for it, you can pick up on like subtle flavors of salt in things that you wouldn't expect, right? Yeah. So part of what I really talk to people about is creating this huge awareness around what are you really tasting? When you eat that apple, are you only tasting something sweet?
No, not really. No, we taste so much more than that. And there are, absolutely.
Yep. So salty and sweet are definitely two like I said, the two most energized are the ones that we feel like we have to have the willpower around, that we have to resist, because otherwise, we're going to be a big failure or whatever it is, right? There's so much to it. But
there's a lot of shame and guilt associated with those,
yes.
and judgment around those two, especially, like you said, both from the weight, the weight loss industry and the medical industry.
Right.
And,
of course.
And we kind of get extremist views of, oh, you've put on all this weight, so let's take you to this extreme place because now you have to get back, but it's out of balance.
Right.
And instead of focusing on getting back in balance and allowing the body to expel, release, let go, it's let me hurry up and charge you there, because we also want results really fast.
Right.
So,
Cool.
All right. What's next?
Yeah. Okay. So next is sour. So sour is a flavor that people are typically, they think they know what sour is, but sometimes it gets confused with bitter. So if you think about the lemon, right, when you suck on a lemon and you get that puckering feeling, that's the sour.
I got it already. I just thought of a lemon. I already have the pucker feeling.
Yep. And that's a beautiful thing. And that is a perfect example of what sour does for your body. So it starts that digestive process, right? The first thing that happens when you eat something is you need the saliva to start breaking down your food, right? Mm-hmm. Well, that sour flavor when it's, again, from the right source, continues to do so in your body. So can you think of a sour flavor that would be a classic thing that if you had digestive issues and someone told you that you should do this, can you think of what sour thing you might be told to eat or consume that supports digestion?
Ginger?
Ginger definitely supports digestion, but would you think of ginger might be a little sour? I'm thinking more on lines of like probiotics.
Ooh, good question. I don't know. I have an iron stomach. I can digest everything.
That's awesome.
I know.
So a lot of times people are told to, eat yogurt, and there's more of a dairy thing now, right? But the probiotics in yogurt are one of them. And yogurt, when it's not inundated with sugar,
minus the honey and the vanilla and the Yep. Okay.
So what happens with these cultures is whenever we create something sour, so it's in the case of yogurt, kombucha. Kombucha these are fermented things, right? So these are natural food products that go through a fermentation process that makes them sour, which gives us the probiotics, which gives us benefits to our digestive system.
So does kimchi count?
Yes.
I love kimchi. So sauerkraut. Kimchi.
Yep.
I love those things.
But they have to be, like in the case of sauerkraut, it has to be just the cultured sauerkraut, right? Because now there's like canned sauerkraut that's like cabbage and vinegar and all the crap that's in it. Like the ingredients on a good cultured sauerkraut should just be cabbage and salt, because that's all it takes to start that fermentation process.
Cool.
So again, the living flavors, the real live cultures versus the citric acid, the distilled vinegar, the things that don't have life left in them, right? So you get the support from the sour flavors when you're working with these real foods and real flavors, and then craving sour, like people that crave sour, it's fascinating to me because almost every time I meet someone that craves something sour, I ask them if they have digestive issues. They're like, "How did you know?" I'm like, "You just
so your body gives and your body's already giving you clues. Hey, there's something not in balance here. Right. Go eat this flavor; it'll help get us back in balance." Which
is why, like I try in my community, I talk to people about cravings and I bring up the conversation all the time because cravings are our body's only way of telling us something, right? Mm-hmm. And when you recognize, like you talked about this whole sugar addiction thing, like that's a cycle of being stuck on a sugar, and it's a flavor that isn't giving you nutrition, right? So if you want something sweet and you're putting this sweet thing that doesn't have nutrition in your body, and your body's like, well, that didn't give me what I want, so give me more. So then we feel like we have to resist this sweet craving, whereas you might just find the satisfaction for your sweet craving if you eat a real, live, real sweet thing that has all these other things attached to it, right?
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, so sour goes to bitter.
Okay.
Bitter is my favorite because bitter is, I call it, think of it like a bitter pill to swallow. There's not enough bitter in our world. That's why we don't like it. Like you talked about what's familiar, what's not familiar.
Right.
The food industry knows to take bitter out of things, and they'll tell you it's a sign of poison. Bitter is medicine.
Right.
Bitter is your teas, your herbs, your spices, your detoxifying items. Anything that detoxifies you has a bitter taste to it. Like I said, think of it like medicine, right? Too much is not good. You don't need a lot of it, but it also is what satiates you. So when we go back to that apple, when you're eating something sweet and you take a bite of that apple and the skin is actually bitter, and that's the part that's the medicine. It's the part that protects the apple, right?
Yep. Yep.
So that creates the satiating feeling in your body. So have you ever sat down and ate, 10 apples?
No.
Like if you want an apple, do you ever feel like you have to eat 10 of them?
No.
Like you do with a cookie?
No.
Right?
No. One. Sometimes two, if it's a really good Honeycrisp apple.
Right. Right. But there's never any bad effects of that either, right?
Right. Nope. Very true.
Yeah.
Well, and there's some apples that are bitter, like Granny Smith, and some people absolutely don't like them at all.
Right. Granny Smith will be considered sour, I would say. It's got that.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
And sour and bitter are typically people do confuse those a lot.
Right. So you talked about teas and things. So I know, so there's some cultures like, Japanese, we talk about Japanese green tea. And we also talk about how when you're eating, one of the ways to satiate us and say, I'm good, is to eat what you want to eat in a proportion size, and then drink tea. Because
it's perfect.
It ends the process and says, I'm complete.
That's exactly what bitter flavors do.
Yeah. Cool.
That's exactly what it does. Matter of fact, I had a nutritionist working with me, and that was her big aha. Her takeaway from the whole course was like, I can't believe how bitters they punctuate the meal. They just make you feel full. It makes you feel done. And teas are a beautiful way to do that.
Right. Well, it also then for people that we've talked about types of eating habits, and some of it is habitual, addictive, et cetera, which leads to some of the overeating. So you might eat a healthy meal and be done proportionately, but not feeling that fulfillment and satisfaction. And a great way to do that is a warm tea. First, the warmth warms us and that warm feeling that we're looking for from fulfillment. And then the bitterness of the tea says, and I'm good. I've had plenty. Yeah. And it, that's why so many cultures do have tea at dinner, and it's like you eat and then you have tea. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
And so it's definitely an appetite regulation thing. And like I said, that's why we don't find it in our everyday processed foods, because again, the food industry knows that if there's a bitter element to something, that's why natural flavors is becoming a big thing. Like they want to flavor everything with these chemical flavors because they can remove the bitter elements of these things, and then you just keep eating, right? Yeah. It's scary. And
well, tell us about the last one, because that's the one that so fascinates me. I love it. I like the way it sounds. Anyway,
yes, it's a cool word to say, umami. It's
nobody ever says, "Oh, I have a craving for umami flavor." Yes. Like nobody ever says that.
Nobody says it, and yet you probably crave it and you don't even know it, right? It's a flavor that is not everyday conversation. Chefs usually know it. And a lot of times in Asian cultures, if you're familiar with Asian, like it was developed in an Asian by a Japanese scientist. And the crazy thing is that it was developed at the exact same time that he was developing monosodium glutamate, which is the chemical recreation of the umami flavor. Yes. So umami is the flavor of protein. So it is a flavor that coats your whole mouth. We can always recognize that instant, like kind of burst of saliva that happens when we eat something sour. But what happens with umami is it actually coats your whole tongue. It's this coating. You can call it a meaty taste, like a meaty flavor, but it doesn't just happen in meat. It doesn't have to be a piece of chicken or a piece of steak. Those are great examples, but you can get umami in a mushroom. If you think about the difference between eating a piece of iceberg lettuce and a piece of kale, right? Yeah. Like not only is it the texture a little bit different, but that meatiness that you get in a piece of kale, that's the umami flavor. Yeah. So it's that flavor. And MSG, which used to be red flagged all the time, and we used to be able to avoid it easily, is now back on every label in every snack food. We're so worried about gluten and dairy and all these other things now it's just blatantly labeled now. But it's also hidden in natural flavors. It's all over the place because it creates that yummy, mouth-watering, delicious flavor that keeps you going back for more.
Right.
It also shows up as hydrolyzed yeast. That's another ingredient. Like when you see that,
interesting.
That's the umami flavor that they're recreating. So they're giving all kinds of different names to it. One of my personal stories, I'm gluten-free and I have been for 7 years now. I found myself not being able to stop eating the gluten-free pretzels. They're these glutino pretzels, right? They're made from like potato starch and tapioca starch and all this crap. Like there's zero nutrition. Back when wheat wasn't destroyed and we could actually eat wheat, like wheat is protein. Gluten is the protein in wheat, right? So when we were eating that good old-fashioned crispy pretzel that was coated in salt, we were actually getting umami because there was protein there. Now it's starch, potato starch, rice starch, tapioca starch, because we want to recreate that crunch, we want to recreate that flavor, and there's salt on it, but they're putting hydrolyzed yeast on it. And I eat it, and I eat it, and I eat it, and it's so yummy, delicious. It's that buttery, yummy flavor. And I'm like, why can't I stop eating these things? And that's it, right? It's that keeps you going back flavor. Yeah. And it's in everything.
Yeah.
So without that actual protein, your body's going to just keep saying, give me more, give me more, give me more.
Yep. So can you give people kind of maybe 2 or 3 simple things they could do easy day to day about how to enhance flavor? So some of the things we've talked about, is it roams, is it raw, does it rot, that kind of thing. But what are some things that people can do? A lot of times there's food blandness, right? If I'm eating vegetables, they're just so bland. So are there, do you have kind of a, 2 to 3 maybe simple tips or spices or flavors or things that they can do to give their food,
Yeah.
I know that I've used some of the things that you've produced to make kind of bland food actually have a flavor, which makes it more enjoyable, right? Because we don't want to just sit there and chew lettuce, and we don't like because it's not familiar, and we get to just sit there and chew a raw vegetable or even a steamed, but it's like, wow, this is such an exciting experience of having this plain steamed vegetable. So do you have kind of just simple flavors or things we can add to some of those things that we're choosing to eat, so we could have that? Our mouth likes to be excited, just like our eyes like to be excited, and our ears like to be excited, and our brain likes to be excited. So does our mouth.
Yeah.
So how can we excite our mouth a little bit?
Absolutely. And we usually, we're only used to the go-tos, the sugar and the sweet, or the salt and the sugar, right? So we think that's the only thing that provides flavor, and it's really not. One of the classic easiest things to do is, I always say, use your garnishes, right? So if you're out, or if you're a squeeze of lemon, all you need is a wedge of lemon or a wedge of lime. Put a little bit of salt if you want, but then if you add that lemon to it, a squeeze of lemon onto your food, it can brighten up all the flavors that are already there. So it just it opens up your taste buds. It makes things more alive. And it doesn't have to be lemon if you don't like lemon. It can be lime. It can be a little splash of like apple cider vinegar, just a tiny bit. You don't need to make it taste like lemon. You just need a tiny little squirt to give it that little pizzazz. Good. Yep. Cool. Okay. And you talked about spices. I mean, spices they're so good for you. You can just get like a classic Italian blend, right? So it would have like a rosemary, oregano, thyme. These are things people think of it sometimes as like a pizza spice. Like you can use that on anything. If you buy a good blend that has, salt and pepper and an herb and maybe some garlic, like I used to make the surgeon pepper, right? Like you can just, if it says, steak blend or chicken blend or whatever, if you like the taste, just put it on anything. You don't have to follow the rules of the label, right? Taste things, put them in things. Yeah. The other thing I like to suggest to people is a good quality olive oil, right? Okay. Like if it's a good quality olive oil, it's going to give you that buttery kind of umami flavor, but it's going to have a bitterness to it too, which will give you the benefits of the bitter. If you ever had like a really good quality olive oil, and you take it alone, it almost makes you cough.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take a lot. You don't have to, again, you don't have to make it taste like olive oil, right? Just
Right.
let the flavors play together. And look for ways to bring a little of each of the 5. That's what I always suggest. Like if you get all 5 flavors on your plate, not only are you waking your mouth up, but you're also getting all of those different nutrition categories, right? So you're getting a little protein, you're getting a little minerals, you're getting your good carbs in the sweets, you're getting your detoxifying things in your bitter flavors. So it's all there and it's alive in your mouth. So lemons, olive oil. I always say pink Himalayan salt is, a nice, a good salt, a go-to salt. And just use fresh fruit. Like if you're making a salad, include a little bit of sweetness in your salads or in your dishes. Use fruit juices to enhance a sauce. If something doesn't taste like it has enough flavor to it, use something natural like a fruit juice or a honey or, just to kind of bring out the flavors of things.
Wonderful. Well, those are all some great tips. So Sherry, I know you're in a Facebook group, so tell us about your Facebook group, and I will post a link in the comments so if people want to join that they can join you. So
awesome.
Your Facebook group.
Yep. My Facebook group is called the Salty, the Sweet, the Sour, and the Savvy. So yeah, we do just kind of what I've been chatting about. We talk about flavors from the category perspective. We talk about cravings. We talk about how to find good sources. How do I find living flavors of salty? How do I find living flavors of, umami? How do I understand what a living flavor is versus a manufactured flavor? And it's a cool community. There's chefs in there. There's nutritionists in there. There's chiropractors in there. There's just foodies in general, people that like to cook, people that don't know how to cook, people that want to eat better. Like it's a really neat community because food, like you said, food connects us, and it's a different conversation, looking at it from this category of flavor as opposed to like being attached to the one food we always want to eat.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Sherry, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so grateful you came, and I'm sure my community will find value in the information that you shared. And I always learn something from you every time I spend time with you. And so I appreciate you sincerely. And like I said, in my group where we're having this, I will post a link to your Facebook group. And so team group, if you're interested in what Sherry has to say, I'm in her group. I follow her group. I find some great inspiration, and I really like how simple you make it and the simplicity you bring to it and the lack of complication. That's what I appreciate, because life is already full of complication, and everything that I do, I'm trying to help life be less complicated for myself and for those that are around me.
Yes, great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. Well, thank you, Sherry. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. You too.
And we'll connect with you online.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay. Thanks.
Bye-bye.